Hey everybody, how's it going? Happy Thursday, aka Friday Eve, because it's like pretty late at night. Kind of. What time is it? 7:30. I don't even know. All of the times are running together in my mind. We are live, clearly not in the home studio. We are in a completely different setup. Tonight I am actually in, of all places, Ohio, undisclosed location, near a university. So my hotel has this lovely girl studying, reading her books, learning things behind me. But I am here in town filming for somebody else's podcast tomorrow morning, and I'm super excited. It is a huge honor to be invited onto this particular podcast. I'm not going to tell you who it is yet. Some of you guys know over on Locals already, but it's going to be coming out in like 1 to 3 months. So we won't like super hype up the episode that I'm going to be filming tomorrow because it's not coming out for a really long time. But I'm super, super honored to be here and excited to explore a whole new part of Ohio. My sister just moved to Ohio for med school a couple of months ago, but I really haven't spent that much time in this state. So exciting stuff, and we love to see it. I apologize for the pushback of an extra hour. I told you guys this morning we were going to be live at 6:30. We are now live at 7:30, obviously, because travel these days is just kind of a nightmare. I don't know if you guys spend a lot of time in airports. Chat, let me know, but it has gotten so bad in Biden's America to fly anywhere, especially when you have a layover somewhere. 99.99999% of the time, my flight ends up getting canceled or delayed, or there's some sort of issue. That's exactly what happened today flying through Charlotte. So we are a little bit late to the game, but that's okay. I've also had the weirdest 24 hours of all time. So any advice that you guys might be able to give me about this would be appreciated. As you guys know, I moved to Florida in March, and I really haven't spent that much time living on the East Coast. I lived in Washington, D.C. a handful of times, once when I was working at the White House, and once when I was at grad school at Georgetown University and lived there in Washington, D.C. in the city again. But it's really my first time living in the tropical East Coast, and yesterday we had the most severe storm I think we've experienced thus far since Brock and I moved to Florida. It was so bad that our apartment on the 19th floor of this building that I'm streaming out of and that I live in and all of that flooded through the windows on the 19th floor of my apartment. So insane. If anyone has any advice for how to deal with flooding in your apartment, it really wasn't that severe, thank goodness, but how to prepare for East Coast rainstorms because clearly I'm not ready for them. If you have any rain jacket recommendations or rain boot recommendations, or just how to deal with everything being wet all of the time. I'm not quite used to living on the East Coast with this degree of humidity, and it was a little bit insane. So I got basically no sleep last night. I was dealing with my apartment flooding and praying that it wasn't going to touch any of my streaming equipment. Thank God it didn't. It was very minor. All ended up working just okay. But please send help, send suggestions, chat, because it's been a weird 24 hours. Thus, we will be doing a little bit shorter of a stream than normal because I'm exhausted and because we're on the road, and I know we're not in our normal setup, so we probably sound a little bit echoey and the quality of the stream is going to be a little bit lower, but I thought it was so important for us to continue streaming today anyway because the topic that we're covering tonight is so, so important and it cannot go undiscussed or unnoticed in modern American society and modern Western society. So as we jump into our conversation, please do me a huge, huge favor and hit the like button on this stream. That might look like a little thumbs up or a heart depending on where you are watching from. Make sure, most importantly, that you are smashing that follow or subscribe button wherever you guys are watching. We are streaming on YouTube, on Rumble, on Facebook, on Getter, and of course on Locals tonight. And I'm so excited to, as always, see all of our favorite familiar faces popping up in our live chat. So don't forget to use the live chat feature throughout our conversation today as well. I also want to give a huge shout out and thank you to our sponsor that's making today's stream possible, our friends over at Public Square. You guys might see they have like a fancy new beautiful logo going on, which is very exciting. Public Square is an online marketplace of more than 70,000 small businesses in the United States, all of which share your values. They are all pro-life, pro-family, and pro-freedom. And as we get closer to Black Friday and you're thinking about different businesses that you might want to support going into the holiday season, you can find all of them right here on Public Square. Anything that you can possibly imagine is here, kind of like an Amazon platform, and now they just rolled out one cart checkout shopping, where you can actually have a transaction with multiple different companies all in the same transaction on their app and website. So go check that out, publicsquare.com. And I just dropped the link in our live chat for where you guys can download their app and also add your small business. If you are a business owner of any kind, you absolutely need to be on Public Square in any capacity whatsoever. Lots of you guys have told me that you already have been using Public Square to boost your business, and it's made such a big difference in your profits and growing your community and everything else. Okay, let's jump right in. I am going to be joined here in a few minutes for this conversation with my amazing friend, Xaviaer DuRousseau. I don't know if you guys follow Xavier. He is actually a personality for PragerU. And if you've been following me for a really long time, you'll know that I got my start as a content creator working with PragerU right out of college. They are so phenomenal. I absolutely love their entire team. And Xavier and I actually sat down yesterday, so our portion of this conversation is pre-recorded. He's an incredibly busy guy, and I wanted to make sure we had this safe and sound before I went on the road to travel to Ohio today. From Florida. So we'll play that clip here in just a second. But he joined me to talk about the insane decline, if not complete decimation, of masculinity that we are seeing in society today. I saw a post of his on Instagram go pretty viral a couple of weeks ago, and you guys know I post stuff about gender and gender identity and gender roles in society all the time, so this is something I'm pretty used to talking about. But I've just noticed more so in the last few months than at any other time in the last few years, masculinity and manhood is being entirely overhauled and replaced with hyper femininity. And we're watching men start to take over women's spaces at an alarming rate, unlike anything that we've ever seen before in the last several years. For example, men are not just competing occasionally in women's sports anymore, but in almost every single major women's sports competition, or at any level, in the high school level, in the college level, in the professional level, we're watching men start to take over those spaces in all of the sports all over the place. We're watching men compete in women's beauty pageants and win spots to compete for Miss Universe 2 times so far, for the first time in the competition's history. We're watching men be awarded Woman of the Year awards over and over and over again, and no, not in the funny way when Ron Swanson was awarded the Dorothy Smythe Woman of the Year award in Parks and Rec, but like quite literally, not as a joke, not as satire. Men are making the best women today. It's becoming so unbelievably common that it's not even funny anymore. Like, it's not even worth making a joke about or laughing about, because it's just becoming the norm in society to a rate that I, as a woman, feel very uncomfortable with, because where the heck are all of the feminists claiming that they're supporting women's opportunities and true women's equality in society? But also, it's putting women in an uncomfortable position for our safety, for our lives, even in our sports, in our bathrooms, and in other situations. So I invited Xavier to have this conversation with me because it's just getting to a point where I don't know where we go from here. But the good news is the trends that we're seeing with our generation give me a lot of hope. So I wanted to start everything out by just reacting to some clips that I had seen go pretty viral on TikTok and on Instagram over the last several months related to this subject, and see what you guys think. So don't forget to use our chat function over on the side. This is the message that we are sending to young men about how to gain followers, how to get as many impressions on social media as possible, and how to make the biggest impact culturally. Let's start with a clip of a trans woman, biological male transitioning to woman, talking about how trans women are supposed to use the bathroom.
If you back a wild animal into a corner, they're going to become a dangerous animal. So if you want to die on that hill of yours of righteousness and moral majority, then you go right ahead. I dare you to try and stop me from going into a women's bathroom.
I dare you?
It will be the last mistake you ever make. I dare you to try and stop a transgender woman in my presence from using the bathroom.
Is no one else concerned about the legitimate threat that this person is inciting on social media? I thought we cared about incitement of violence.
Will be the last mistake you ever make. This is a call to action and a call to arms to...
A call to action and what? Did I hear that correct, chat? A call to action and a call to arms? But this isn't incitement to violence. What I say as biological truth is incitement of violence somehow.
Everybody within the United States that are scared, worried, have children that are transgender, lesbian, bi, or gay, this is a call to action. You need to arm up.
Okay, I heard that. I heard that loud and clear. You need to arm up. If any of the roles were reversed in this conversation, this person would be taking a one-way trip to federal prison. I'm just saying. The FBI would come knock on their door. But because it's this way in the conversation, it just goes viral on TikTok for a few weeks.
Plain and simple. Go out, buy a gun.
Okay, that's the third time. Am I like missing something? How is this acceptable?
Learn how to use it efficiently, through and through, because the time to act is now. You need to protect yourself, and you need to protect your fellow transgender brothers and sisters and theys and thems. You need to protect the rest of us in the LGBT community, as I'm going to do myself.
Okay, so you're admitting you're going to buy a firearm and you're going to learn to use it efficiently so that you can use the bathroom. Am I understanding this correctly? Am I missing anything?
Because there are lots of people like me who are not afraid to die.
This is giving mass shooter vibes. I'm just saying.
I love my girlfriends to death, but I would rather die for them to secure their safety, freedom, and future than to live and not have anything done. So you go ahead. You protect your kids.
Okay, so that happened. Let's just acknowledge that for a moment. This is insanity. This is crazy. Craven says, okay, that was not just a direct threat. That was also encouraging people to go purchase weapons. Yeah. Franklin said, it's male. Do you guys remember that video? But it doesn't stop there. It's all over social media. Here's the term femboy. Sees one on TikTok. Follows one. Oh my. Yeah, I don't know if this would be attractive to me in any way. But you do you, boo-boo. You probably just saw the very cute little teaser that just popped up there. I reacted to this upcoming video on Instagram a few weeks ago. This got millions and millions and millions of views on social media, and I cut it very short comparatively, so you're welcome, but this goes on for like a minute and a half. Because I guess this is what the new standard of totally normal behavior in society actually looks like for men. Just a grown man with his mask and a frilly pink dress and a wig, drinking a baby's bottle of milk at the mall. Completely normal behavior. No weird vibes associated with this whatsoever. The peak masculine form, if you will. All right, then we get into how this is impacting the military. So while Russia and China are putting out ad after ad after ad after ad about the peak masculine training that they are putting their military through, this is what the United States of America's military is filming to put on TikTok.
Patient, yeah, oh, I was patient. Now I can scream that we made it.
My friends in the military and who did ROTC in college that I was very tangentially involved in, a lot of my friends were in ROTC in the military, if they had ever seen something like that in their experience, I mean, I still have friends who are in active duty, I can't imagine what the response actually would be. And those are the people that we are trusting to go defend freedom all over the world. I guess that's what happens when you do cartoon ads for the US Army for me and my two moms from my sorority. Peak athletic form there. Drag queen style. POV, this next video says, you tell me that you're more into feminine.
It's like stars on my wrist when I think about the shit that we did to one another. We can talk about it later if you want. It's all
That's a dramatic change.
ever really doing something's wrong. 'Cause you
So you see all these videos, and then I see something like this on TikTok today that doesn't even remotely surprise me. It's a screenshot of a tweet. Here's a Cheery Friday fact, and I ended up going and fact checking this, so this is factual information. The average 22-year-old male today, so just like the people we just reacted to from TikTok, today has roughly the same testosterone levels as a 67-year-old male had in the year 2000. 67 versus 22. Average testosterone has fallen close to 50% in the last 2 decades, and nobody is talking about it. It reminds me of the conversation that we had earlier this week about severely declining fertility rates in women and how 1 in 4 pregnancies, actually more than 1 in 4, 26% of pregnancies in America today are ending in miscarriage. It is not normal what is happening to women, but the exact same thing is happening to men. And it makes me wonder what the heck is out there in our food, in the chemicals, in the cleaning supplies that we're using, or aerosols that are all around us all the time, the clothes that we're wearing, our exercise and our lifestyle, just every single thing about the culture that we have built for this next generation. Is that contributing to severely low testosterone levels and therefore less masculinity? Probably. And simultaneously, we live in a culture that has attacked anything remotely masculine as toxic and has tried to systematically erase it from society. I've said this a million times in speeches and in a lot of the content that I put on social media and here on the stream, that culture was so successful in erasing manhood first by labeling everything masculine as toxic masculinity and something that's outdated or bigoted and needing to be removed from society, that now they're applying the exact same playbook to young women. And we're seeing this trend of not calling women women. You don't call moms moms. They're birthing people or people who menstruate. In fact, we're trying to say that women aren't even needed for all of the things that women have a unique, beautiful, God-given purpose to contribute to society with, like growing new human beings. Instead, there are crazy mad scientists out there saying we should just grow babies in pods in laboratories, or women can just not be a part of the procreation process at all because we could just grow eggs from stem cells, and that's way more progressive and that's way better for society. So I find this interesting. If we back this all the way up to before society erased manhood and masculinity, what's the end result of erasing womanhood and femininity? It's easy to lose all of our faith in this conversation and think, well, I guess we're just screwed. Like, that's that for Western society. Thanks everybody for tuning in the last several hundred years. But I actually think Generation Z, our generation, is the key for how we move forward and move out of this severe crisis of the lack of manhood entirely in society. I'm going to tell you why on the other side of our conversation with my awesome friend Xaviaer DuRousseau, a PragerU personality. But first, before we get to all of our stuff related to Generation Z, I want you guys to hear absolutely every single thing that Xaviaer has to say. He is such an incredible friend of mine. I've really enjoyed getting to know him more over the last several months, and he has some really exciting stuff that he's working on at PragerU that I know he's really excited to share with you. So again, if you guys are just now tuning in, you didn't come in at the beginning, I pre-recorded this segment of our stream yesterday. I wanted to make sure that we had all of the right stuff well recorded and good to go from this conversation before I hit the road to head to Ohio. So this part is pre-recorded for about 20 minutes. I'll be hanging out in the live chat. We love transparency around here on the stream to answer any questions that you guys might have, but I know you're going to love everything that Xaviaer has to say. So without further ado, here he is. Xavier, thank you so much for joining us on the stream today. I am so excited to be getting to know you better over the last few months and just to feature you as part of our conversation today. But for those who might not be aware of who you are and what your content is, can you give us a really brief overview into all things Xavier?
Of course. Thank you for having me. If you don't know my name, never seen my face, I'm Xavier DuRousseau. I'm a PragerU personality living in Los Angeles, fighting for common sense out here. And I am very happy to be here.
Fighting for common sense. We need more of that in LA and around the world. Tell us more a little bit about your journey with political evolution and what got you into being a conservative content creator.
Of course. So if you want more details, of course, head to PragerU.com. Check out my Stories of Us video. But the long story short, I was a lifelong liberal. I had borderline radical leftist parents, and I was a BLM activist. I was a social justice warrior long before even George Floyd. And in 2020, I was supposed to be on a Netflix reality show teaching people how to be Black Lives Matter activists. And the process of that, I was like, let me study the counter arguments, make sure I'm ready for any debate. And I stumbled upon Candace Owens, and I tried to debunk her and debunk PragerU videos, and you can only imagine how that worked out for me. So I got so red pilled, I backed out of the show, and I was sitting there at the end of 2020, and I was like, what do I do from here? What do I do now? And I was like, you know what? I'm going to speak out about what I learned. My very first video went viral, and I started building all kind of connections in this industry, and now I have met PragerU and become a part of the team.
I love that so much. And if you guys haven't watched Xavier's Stories of You or Stories of Us video, I love that video. It is so compelling and I think tells a really similar story of what many people our age are going through with navigating what the loudest voices in society say versus finding objective truth for yourself. And so I'm super excited to have you join us for this conversation today because I think one of the most powerful narratives in our generation, and that's pervading every aspect of our culture, is this erasure of gender entirely. And what started as the erasure of men and masculinity, attacking all masculine traits as toxic, I have found has very much carried over into the women's side of things, saying birthing people instead of mothers or people who menstruate instead of women. Most of the best women out there are men now. And I'm really curious just to get your take as a young man, where you think this started and if you're seeing this on both the masculine and feminine side right now.
Wow, yes, it's such a heavy conversation with so much to unpack there. I think a lot of the issue comes from father absence in general and the fact that we have baby mama culture and all these different things. And with baby mama culture, it's like you have these strong, independent women who don't need a man, who are now raising weak, dependent boys who don't want to be men. And it's becoming a generational issue that is just worsening at this point. I think a lot of it also is that men no longer want to step up to the challenge of being a man. There are expectations that there are of being a man, just knowing how to fix things, knowing how to be strong. That's why you see so many men going into women's sports. You have men who are taking the easy route by going and competing against women because physiologically it's easier for them. Men are expected to make more money, so it's pretty much a normative for the men to be the provider, and a lot of people just don't want to step up to that anymore. I think it's not shocking to me that there are statistics that there's nearly triple the amount of men who are quote unquote transitioning into women than there are women transitioning into men, and I think that's very telling.
I'm so glad you brought that up because that's been something that's really been uneasy that I've been observing over this last year or so is just the sheer number of men trying to make their way into women's spaces through this pathway of transitioning. We obviously talk a lot about that in the realm of sports, but here on the stream, we've unpacked a trans sorority issue at the University of Wyoming, of all places, over the last year or so. Miss Universe now has 2 trans contestants for the very first time. Could be more going into the pageant as it nears the Miss Universe competition. But we're seeing this all over the place. Magazine covers, headlines, awards for Woman of the Year. Even Kim Kardashian was named Man of the Year yesterday. So we're going all over the place with all of this stuff. But do you really think it's just this path of taking the path of least resistance and doing something easier? Or do you think there's something maybe larger about feminizing men in society that's leading to that disparity?
I think it's a bit of both. I think there are just a lot of men who don't want to, again, live up to the expectations of being a man. And that's not to say that women don't have their own struggles, but women also have their own strengths. But I do think there's a larger issue here because there's something that, I hate to overuse the word demonic, but there's something that's very just very powerful, I'll say, that is a part of this, because you look at what it's doing, it's completely destabilizing our society. When you look at these people who identify as non-binary, or these people who change their gender, how rare is it for you to see someone that has identified as a they them who looks sane? These people look crazy, these people are unstable, and
Mhm.
I'm always wondering, why would you want more children specifically to look up to that? Why are you introducing these perverse perspectives of the world to young children so that they go down this route? And if you claim that people in the LGBT community are oppressed, then why would you want more children to choose to be oppressed? But when you put this idea in their head from a young age, that's exactly what happens, and they end up being completely unstable.
You posted an image on your Instagram a couple weeks ago and again today of a man in a women's bathroom dressed in this very weird, almost fetish like costume of a little girl. And just a few days ago, I reacted to a video on Instagram of a guy wearing almost exactly the same outfit, sipping milk from a baby's bottle in the middle of a mall, videoing himself doing that. What aspect of this do you think really is almost like a fetish? And I see a lot of people talking about that now on Instagram in particular.
Yeah, I had to repost that picture. You actually reminded me of that. And it's really because men used to hunt and now men are just predators. Think about that for a
Mm.
while. And well, not all men, but these ones that are wearing the dresses, it's getting very strange when you take a look at it. And I do think a lot of it is based on sexual fetish. I was talking about today on Twitter or X now, how people who are transitioning physically from a male to a female and getting this axe wound and calling it a vagina, that is nothing more than a fetish, because a vagina's sole purpose, or not sole purpose, but primary purpose, is for giving birth and for creating life. But when you are going and getting this axe wound, and excuse me for being vulgar, all that is for a natural sexual pleasure. So all of this is deeply rooted in the perversion that we're seeing in our country, that's getting increasingly worse as porn is getting worse. I learned from Dave Rubin actually recently that I believe it's well over a third of the internet traffic right now is pornography. So it definitely does go into a deeper issue that, again, I view as pretty spiritual.
Hmm.
And we just have a lot of battles to fight in this issue.
That's interesting to hear you say that it kind of starts with this sexual depravity that we're dealing with in society that might bleed over into transitioning or some of the other erasure of strong masculinity in a positive way that we've seen in society. Where do you think that starts? Where did that come from? How do we get out of that?
It's kind of hard to determine exactly what the root is of that, but I think it's just progressively happened. People have become more and more sexual in the media. We have Instagram now, which is basically soft pornography. And the more that this type of stuff is normalized and just destigmatized, I think people are becoming numb to what is sane and what is just completely inappropriate to be in front of young people. You have young people being exposed to this at such incriminating ages, really, and that's developed now into them being just completely numb again as they grow up, and it gets worse. The problem just keeps getting worse as our generations are getting older, because things are starting to shock us less. You think about what used to shock people 100 years ago. A woman showing their belly button on TV was groundbreaking when it happened the first time, but now you have people just completely naked walking around in the streets at parades for things like Pride.
Hmm.
So the problem is just on a downward trajectory, and it's not going to get any better unless we put a hard stop to it.
Nothing shocks me anymore. I probably comment that on 20 Instagram posts a day about the craziness that we're seeing in our world. And maybe some of this is just becoming numb to
Mhm.
the most outlandish ideas because everything is so outlandish. Are you worried that that might lead to this very slippery slope of normalizing true evil in society beyond even what we've already seen?
Oh, 100%. I mean, it's the old tale of, if you give an inch, they take a mile. This slippery slope is no longer just a slippery slope. It's like a plunge to hell at this point. And things are so much worse than I ever would have imagined them being. We've already heard so many situations about the people who are minor attracted people. The more we allow this to happen, the worse this situation is going to get.
I actually read a story the other day, Valuetainment broke it, of a professor of animal rights and bioethics at Princeton publishing a paper in his journal. Somebody else wrote it, but he published it, and then sharing it on Twitter that maybe we should revisit whether or not sexual attraction between humans and animals should be morally permissible and certain actions to be morally permissible. So I think there's this wide open door right now, particularly of men suggesting these things in society and trying to push some of these agendas and normalize things, including this professor at Princeton, that's really concerning to me. Meanwhile, strong values of masculinity and positive attributes of masculine role models are being completely attacked in society. You guys are called toxic or evil or outdated or bigoted or sexist or whatever name we want to throw at that. Do you have anybody that you can think of right off the top of your head of what it looks like to be a good masculine role model for strong male traits? And where else do you think that people should be looking for these things in our society that's attacking for them?
Well, the first person that came to my mind was Dennis Prager. I mean, that man has been just a stand-up guy for so long. I have a lot of respect for him and just everything that he's accomplished and what he fights for. He fights for truth and has persevered in his career for so long. I think those are some of like the values that we are missing from our society. I really look at the older generations as the example that we need to be looking back at, because right now this new generation is insane. And to hear that a professor is trying to normalize bestiality is what it sounds like.
Yep.
That is such a jump scare to me. Like I can't verbally express enough just how disgusting that is and just how much we have lost the plot in this situation.
How can we take back the plot, Xavier? Do you have any words of hope for us about some of our peers that we might work with in the social media space, or maybe the work that you guys are doing at PragerU?
We need to normalize common sense again. I think we need to become much more adamant about this is fact and this is reality. We need to stop with this objective, your truth versus my truth. Like it's just the truth. We need to get back to the core principle of there is a singular truth. And I tell people, I understand, like we are privileged in our situation that we're able to be very vocal about our opinions and not worried about losing our jobs or being canceled. We've already been canceled at this point. But I tell people all the time, you don't have to necessarily be vocal about every single thing that you believe in, but you at least need to stand up and fight against what you don't believe in, because these bad things are happening because too many good people are sitting back and letting it happen.
Absolutely true. And I always say, never sit down and shut up. We've always got to be willing to say something. Switching gears a little bit, I'm very curious to get your opinion as another Gen Zer on this topic. Gen Z is very divided, not just politically, not just from other generations, but even ideologically between men and women. And new polls are coming out saying that amazingly, Generation Z men are so sick and tired of all the crap that we're dealing with in society that you guys are swinging back to being overwhelmingly conservative. Only 28% of Gen Zers in a recent poll who are men said that they identified as liberal, which is insane to think about, especially compared to millennials who came just a few years before us. A lot of people are rejoicing about that, but are frustrated that women are still overwhelmingly identifying as liberal in our generation and that they're embracing a lot of the values of the left. And when I say liberal, I don't mean actually classically liberal, as you probably know, embracing the values of leftism and authoritarianism. I love seeing that from young men. And do you think that A, is a response to the erasure of masculinity and manhood in society, and B, is unique to how we're messaging to men? Because a lot of people are putting the conservative movement under criticism for failing to reach young women, but it sounds like we're doing something right for young men.
hmm I definitely think the pendulum is shifting back. I think things were getting so out of control because by nature, most men want to be masculine. Most men want to have the interests of just what men are usually interested in, or just telling the truth and not having these overly fluffy feelings about every single issue. But TikTok culture has completely emasculated men for so long that you started having your Andrew Tates and your Nick Adams of the world start coming in and just being so almost like a caricature of men, being so aggressively like He-Man about it, that now we have had a slight overcorrection. But I do think as much as the overcorrection can be insane sometimes, the trickle effect of that is still positive. You have a lot of people who can be able to watch someone like an Andrew Tate and be like, okay, like a lot of what he's saying is absolutely insane, but I can't agree with like these core principles of what he's saying. And we're starting to see a lot more of masculinity just making a resurgence, which is a positive thing overall. I don't like the He-Man woman hater style trad bro that we tend to see pretty often, where it's just a complete onslaught on women. I think that's ridiculous. I think as masculine men, part of your job is to uplift women, to protect women, and when you're the head of a household or a family, to lead women. So
Mhm.
I think that is starting to come back. I wouldn't say as much that we have failed women as far as a movement. I just think more women need to wake up and stop allowing their feelings to take precedent over the truth. It's a lot of the times women who are allowing the Dylan Mulvaney's of the world to get up on stage and let the patriarchy win. I think women need to stand up for themselves. And if there ever is going to be a new wave of feminism, it needs to be one that is actually going back to what original feminism was just basic equality and common sense.
You said the word overcorrection there a few times, which I think is a very apt description of probably what's happening with some of these red pill movement guys that you threw out a few names there. For I see a lot of content telling women that, oh, we need to ditch hookup culture and we need to ditch casual dating and we need to throw away our birth control and delete all of our dating apps. And like, yes, that's always great advice. I totally agree with that. But then at the same time, those same people will be telling men, never get married, never settle down, sleep with as many women as you possibly can. That's your responsibility as a man. That's how you become like an alpha male. Why is that messaging so prevalent right now, and what's wrong with it at face value?
I think part of it is because people are exhausted of political correctness to the point that if you say something inflammatory, a lot of men just flock to it now. And because it's so taboo to say those type of things, and those are like the more instinctual natures of certain men, I think that's why they're hyping it up so much. I think that is where, if we're going to say toxic masculinity, I don't think masculinity is inherently toxic, but there is like a level where if that's where you're trying to take it, I don't even view that as truly being masculine. I just think that's caveman like behavior to want to sleep with every woman that you see and treat women like garbage and all of that. I just don't like that approach. I think the trad bros, they've missed the mark a little bit, but I don't think some of them are serious. I think some of them are just being
Hmm.
a bit, basically. Again, it's like a caricature of what they know people want to hear because there's humor to it. But there are unfortunately some people who take it very seriously and are just unhinged at this point.
Tons of people who are taking it really seriously, and there's a huge movement of listeners to content like that. So it's definitely something to be aware of, but I do think you're right. It's almost so fake that it's like almost impossible to believe. You used the word caricature, and I think that's spot on. We like to criticize people like Dylan Mulvaney, for example, for being a caricature of women, but that's kind of the
Mhm.
overcorrection in the other direction of being a hyper caricature of what men are supposed to look like. When you see clips like that, or you see influencers with humongous platforms telling men that the only way to be an alpha male is to go make $1 zillion and buy 20 sports cars and have 20 girls that you hook up with every single week and you never ever get married. How does that make you feel as someone with pretty traditional values who says that you're standing up for masculinity, but might be frustrated with how the world is starting to define masculinity incorrectly?
Well, at this point, I think a lot of people have platforms who just, quite frankly, should not have as large of platforms as they have. But, I'm all for freedom of speech, so go and do your thing. But I think that these trad bros need to go back to what real masculinity is. If we're going to go back to actual tradition, it's all about starting a family. It's about providing for a family. It's about stability. We have lost stability in our society. And I think that's why so many of our issues have become as rocky as they are because we don't have a core foundation. The foundation to a strong society is a strong family led by a patriarch, but we do not have that anymore. So it is sad to see how far so many people have taken the pro masculinity route, but because they've taken it in such a incorrect course.
Hmm. What advice or thoughts do you have, Xavier, as a message to the young men in your generation? You're already trending in the right direction, which is incredible to see. But is there any concrete steps that young men who are looking for these traditional values and seeking objective truth can take in order to start modeling their life to be what our society really needs?
Stay focused. Stay focused on stability. Stay focused on becoming the best version of yourself. Going out all the time, partying all the time, hooking up all the time, like that's not going to make you a better man. That's not going to make you more successful. You need to be out there doing things that's enriching you as an individual and as a man. You should be reading, working hard, figuring out how you can be a better person each day, how you can elevate your career each day, and how you can start planning for your future rather than planning for what's gratifying to you right now in the moment. Delay that gratification to something that's actually fulfilling and sustainable for your future.
Any suggestions for accounts or individual creators for people to follow who might be consuming the red pill crap of the world and who might be looking for actual truth and great examples of a role model today?
Oh yeah, for sure. The first person that comes to mind is Brandon Tatum. He's an incredible father. I love him and Corinne and the relationship that they have. I just saw them this past weekend, and I think that's a perfect example of someone who is a strong man who is leading by example. So if anyone comes to mind, Brandon Tatum.
I could not agree with that more. Brandon and his wife are awesome, and he is such an authentic human being. I love his content. He's doing all kinds of great stuff right now. Xavier, as we let you go, can you let people know where they can follow you and if you have any exciting projects coming up in the next few months?
Of course, you can follow me on Instagram at Xavier. It's irregular spelling. It's Xaviaer, or on X at, oh, I can't even say X. On
I know.
Twitter
I refuse
at
to do it.
Xavier
It will
D.
always be Twitter.
Yeah, it has to maintain Twitter. X just sounds weird, especially because my name starts
I
with an
know.
X. It's just too much going on for me. And of course,
Awesome.
always working on some great things at Prager. Just filmed my first 5-minute video, so that'll be out in a couple months. And we have a couple shows that are in the works, but I can't tell you too much about that yet.
Ooh, exciting to hear about that. And I can't wait for some more updates. Thank you so much for joining us on the stream. We'll be sure to have you back very soon.
Thank you for having me.
Xavier is so great, and I'm so glad you guys got a chance to get to know him a little bit through that conversation. I thought he had so many great points, and on the other side of that conversation and all of the insane videos that we reacted to before we started talking with him, I want to remind you that even in the midst of when everything seems really hopeless, there's a lot of reason to have hope, especially within Generation Z, bringing back masculinity and longing for something a lot more meaningful than the emptiness and the superficiality that our world is presenting to us as somewhat of the only option. I mentioned a couple different polls in that conversation that I wanted to show you one of today because I think it's easy to buy into this lie that all Gen Z men are these like weak, super feminized, not masculine men whatsoever. They're all dressing up in dresses and they never take initiative and they never want to embrace traditional values. And they certainly aren't serving as providers, let alone embracing any other masculine traits. But that's actually not true of Generation Z. In fact, it couldn't be further from the truth about our generation. And I've come to the understanding that the more our society is attacking masculinity, the more we want to overcorrect in the other direction and go back to our roots of traditional gender roles in society. It's almost having this like reverse card effect in culture. The more our society attacks masculinity as toxic, the more they try to erase men and manhood, the more our generation wants to rebel from society and bring it back. There's a really interesting article from Evie magazine that covers this topic and some of the polls that I was mentioning about how teenage boys in America today, so we're talking about the younger half of Generation Z who are currently teenagers, I didn't know if you guys knew this, but are becoming more conservative than ever before in modern history. Women are tending to trend a lot more liberal within the teenage sphere of Generation Z. And I actually joined Charlie Kirk on his podcast this week for an hour live on the radio. And then they ended up publishing it as a standalone podcast episode after about why that disparity exists, that we're doing really, really well with young men. And we have a long way to go with young women and where I think we have the opportunity to make a lot of progress there. So go check that out if you guys haven't already. But the good news is conservative values and traditionalism is already resonating with Generation Z boys, with teenage boys in particular. They are becoming overwhelmingly conservative in how they would classify their own individual religious and political values alike. Evie magazine put this together in August, so you guys can go check this out at any time that you want. Please go, feel free to look it up and go find all of the other polling out there, by the way, because it'll all back this up as well. They say the political landscape in the United States is witnessing a notable shift towards liberalism among young women, especially among the younger Gen Zers. However, the share of boys is going in the complete opposite direction. There was was a survey done by a group called Monitoring the Future that's dating back to the 1970s, and then they keep tracking trends throughout several different generations. And they found that while roughly 1/4 of high school seniors self-identified as conservative in the last 3 years, so over 25%, only 13% identified as liberals. This is a marked shift from the late 2000s, when liberal boys often outnumbered conservatives, as reported by The Hill. During the Jimmy Carter presidency, both boys and girls leaned liberal. So boys are actually trending much, much, much more conservative. And if you look at the graphs of some of this stuff, it's absolutely fascinating. The graph over there on the left is the identities of 12th grade boys. So senior boys in high school, we're talking 17 and 18-year-olds. You can see the marked disparity between the red line spiking way, way up since 2020, going towards conservatives, and the amount of Gen Z boys who are 17 or 18 years old identifying as liberal is dramatically dropping out. And then the exact opposite thing is happening with young women. So while the young women graph certainly should make us a little bit frustrated and realizing that there's an opportunity to look in the mirror and see there's a lot of room for improvement in how we're messaging to young women, look at that graph on the left. That's with essentially very little to no concrete organized messaging of conservative values, or certainly from a particular political party, to Gen Z boys at the larger societal level at all. Like, I would go so far as to argue our messaging to Gen Zers is still really missing the mark when it comes to how we could be the most effective possible. But even without very strong messaging, even without a unified narrative to be telling the next generation and expose them to the values that really matter, boys are getting it. Gen Z boys are getting it. And I think all it is taking is looking around at our broken society and realizing that we want a whole lot more than the brokenness that this world has to offer. And the more our society is attacking men, and there's this huge void of men, the more we're creating strong men unintentionally to fill that void and embrace masculinity in a really positive way, defying all of the odds, regardless of what the pollsters or the loudest voices in the mainstream media or the biggest politicians would tell you. Anissa just dropped in our locals chat, I'm a high school senior and I see this proven true every single day. Any other high school seniors in the chat? I'd be so curious to know if you guys are experiencing this too. But I think it's so telling that every loud voice in society, even those in the conservative movement, so to speak, or in the right of center world in content, is trying to get you to believe that Gen Z is a lost cause, that Gen Z is overwhelmingly these blue hair crybaby socialist liberals, that Gen Z is wearing dresses as young men and they're not pursuing young women, and they aren't interested in getting married, and they aren't interested in starting families, they aren't interested in embracing masculine traits of leadership and strength and power. But they are. And the data is proving that to be the opposite of the approved narrative, trademark in the corner, every single day. We have a long way to go with young women, and I highly encourage you guys to check out my episode with Charlie Kirk talking about how we can make a bigger impact with young women in the future. But what an empowering, incredible thing to be witnessing with this rise of conservatism, of traditional values, and of true masculinity with young men in America, even in the midst of maybe one of the most frustrating times in modern history. There's a saying that Nitty Witty in the chat just reminded me of that goes pretty much like this. I'm paraphrasing, obviously, that good times in society create weak men because we take advantage of everything that's around us and we kind of take everything for granted. And then those weak men create hard times, and then hard times in society create strong men. And that's been a very cyclical process that we've observed over and over and over again throughout all of human history. But I think we're seeing it right now in America. We are in the midst of hard times, especially culturally for our generation, especially in the wake of our society virtually wiping gender of men, masculinity, any masculine traits off the map of our culture in the 2020s. But those hard times are creating strong men willing to embrace who God created them to be for such a time as this, when culture is demanding their leadership more and more with every passing day. I actually have all the hope in the world that now that the left and culture is using the exact same playbook to not just erase men, but erase women the exact same way, the same cycle will repeat for women. Even though the data might not be on our side quite yet, I'd say give it a few years, because even the leftist women that I engage with all of the time on social media or on podcasts when we film things together or on college campuses, they're heartbroken. They realize this world is not offering them the pathway to joy, to fulfillment, to happiness or success that they thought it was going to. And they're looking for something else to find hope and faith in again. They might not know where to find it yet as young women, and they might be having a hard time breaking free of the feminist movement, post-feminist movement, I would argue, that we're living through today going into 2024. But I think they're going to follow the exact same path that we are seeing with young men right now. Every generation in all of human history wants to do one thing in their teenage and young adult years, and that's rebel from the people who are in charge and rebel from the approved thing in society to be punk rock and countercultural. And it just so happens that the way to do that in the 2020s in America today is to embrace who you were born to be, to embrace traditional values with a bit of a newfound spin in a modern world, to tell the truth, to seek the truth, to embrace free speech, to cancel culture, and to encourage a better world for every single generation moving forward. I have all the hope in the world for Gen Z, despite what all of the crazy crap we're seeing in society might lead you to believe, and I hope that you guys will as well after this stream. That's it for tonight. I promised you a pretty short stream today. We're right at an hour almost in the next few minutes. I, again, am in Ohio tonight because I am filming a podcast tomorrow for a very, very special show that I'm so honored to have been invited to be on. I'll tell you all the more details very, very soon on that. My episode's not coming out for at least 1 to 3 months, so I will tell you more about it closer to release day. But because of that, we're going to cut the stream there and no post-stream Q&A because I'm exhausted from my apartment flooding last night in Florida and not getting any sleep. No stream tomorrow. It's Friday, field trip day, as they'd say in my favorite childhood movie, Madagascar, and it's just going to be really hard with my travel schedule. I'm filming this podcast at 10 a.m. and then I have to go right to the airport to head back home because next week is Thanksgiving. I also had the biggest brain fart in the world yesterday and promised you guys I was going to tell you about our streaming schedule for the next few weeks, and I forgot to do that. I did it in our locals post-stream Q&A, but I didn't do it for everybody else. So if you want to stick around for a second and hear what the streaming schedule is going to look like in the next few weeks, please do so. If not, you guys can go. But before you do, don't forget to like this episode, hit the heart button or the thumbs up button, depending on where you guys are watching, and smash that follow or subscribe button to help us continue to grow these independently produced channels. As I mentioned, next week is Thanksgiving, so we are streaming on Monday and Tuesday, but we won't be streaming Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You guys don't want to stream. You're going to be hanging out with your families. You're going to be stuffing your bellies full of food. Don't forget to wear your stretchy pants and playing football and hanging out with everybody outside and seeing your extended families. So no stream next week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I'm actually traveling out of the country shortly after that to speak at the New Zealand March for Life. Huge honor that I've been invited to do that. And there's no way I'm going to go all the way to the other side of the globe and not make a big trip out of that. So you guys are going to have some guest hosts on the stream while I am gone, which is super fun. That's at the very end of November through the first week of December. And we're working on all of the fun programming for you guys behind the scenes on that. And then we'll talk more about Christmas as we get a little bit closer. But wanted to give you guys a heads up on all of those things. I love you so very much. I hope to see you guys soon on Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern, normal streaming time. And I hope you have the greatest rest of your night. Mwah. Be good people. Tell the truth. Have a great weekend, you guys. Love you.